All right, hello, greetings, and welcome everyone to this lightning fast video. It was going to be the fast math, but I figured this might need to take priority here. So here we go. I saw a video. This gent has a channel called Not Good at Anything, which, okay, I can see that you are at least good at bicep curls. I mean, if I'm being honest here, but I digress. Anyway, this channel made a video that got some serious views. At the time of this recording, like 800 and some odd. His premise was that he is not a fan of the most recent funding around the Aptera. Well, this most recent funding round for Aptera because, I mean, reasons. But we're going to talk through his reasons, not in a malicious fashion, but from a perspective of wanting to understand his position and inform his potential lack of information. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. Now, from the jump here, I would like to make sure it is known that he admits that he's speaking from a place of frustration. I understand that because I have done the same on occasion and on this channel, but frustration can lead to poor judgment and understanding, so I will kind of point to point dissect what he was talking about to the best of my ability. His first point is that the funding round is stealing. This one is easy to debunk. Aptera does not have access to anyone's bank accounts unless they work for Aptera, and even that relationship is one way. They can deposit money into their employee's account, but they can't take it back out again. The second claim he has made is that they failed in every other way to make money, so they are falling back on crowdfunding. This is, in my opinion, kind of a half-truth that has been perpetuated by a few of the FUD channels when talking about Aptera. I'm not going to make it known who I spoke with or what companies, but venture capital has expressed interest in making investments in Aptera. The rub usually ends up being how much control these venture capital companies want of Aptera, and it is actually stated as such in a couple of the videos that were put out. But anyway, Aptera's initial run was kind of driven into the dirt by like a venture capital situation and folks that thought they knew better than Chris and Steve. I doubt that they will ever cede control like that again, so their efforts to get large companies to invest in them have been hampered. We'll say hampered. It's not a failing of Aptera more than it is a failing of the current financial system, in my humble opinion. But yeah, that's why I say it's kind of a half-truth, because technically speaking, they did not get the funding up to this point, but that can be boiled down to the fact that the way that the capital system works these days, gaining money for a capital startup, gaining capital for a startup has been sketchy. His next assertion is that the money is going to come in too slowly. His logic is that since Aptera spends $4,100-ish per day, the investors cannot make up the difference fast enough. There is some truth here, so I will acknowledge that up front, but there are two things that I don't believe he took into account when he made that argument, which makes said argument moot, by the way. First, the way they are raising their money this time around is different. Instead of trying to source the entire amount from the crowd like before, they have learned from their mistakes, and they're using crowdfunding to prove out their ability to raise money so that they can get enough loans and the rest of their grant money from various sources. Both of these sources would be large lump sums that would help them get into production. Pair that with the fact that their previous crowdfunding did allow for R&D and parts agreements and things like that to be finalized, and you have a pretty strong argument that this time will be different. Secondly, their fundraising is not going slowly. I know this because you can see their priority delivery slot progress. Essentially, as of the writing of this script, the priority slots were open 13 days ago. Those slots are $5,000 a pop and have been filled. They have filled nearly 400 of them. That far outstrips their daily cash burn and puts their total raise in 13 days at around at least $2 million. That is ignoring the fact that those that invested that for that priority slot probably bumped up that investment to 10,000 in order to get the full discount, and other people that wanted to invest for the discount but didn't have 5,000 on hand, like myself. His next assertion is that since Aptera has 3 million has approximately $3 million in burn rate and 9 million in the bank, they are almost out of money. This is basically true. Yeah. So they are looking at about 3 to 4 months of operating expenses left. But that is more or less how they and most other startups, honestly, operate because they are dependent on funding. That is the state and nature of a startup and not representative of some kind of wrongdoing, since that would make every startup that has ever existed a scam, which, if that is his assertion, I disagree wholeheartedly. He makes several math errors after this that I will just chalk up to his frustration or maybe fingering or basically I'm going to forgive those since everyone makes mistakes, but he equates a day to an hour, more or less, in that little section there, and I'm just gonna jump over that. I'm positive he knows that a day is more than an hour. Anyway, he then asserts that Aptera is panhandling around the world for money. This is accurate. This is how startups work. It is not a distraction. It is the job of the CEO of a company, or in this case, the CEOs of the company, to make sure that the startup has the money for the rest of the company to do their jobs like R&D, marketing, customer outreach, and all that kind of stuff. He then goes into the math for the accelerator program and how they spent $30 million of the $50 million to keep the lights on, but then ignores the fact that the other 20 million was used to get production tooling and R&D done for the battery pack. Aptera is basically making progress. The progress is definitely steady and not as swift as many, including Aptera's own team, would like, but they are making progress, which is not something that is indicative of some kind of theft or attempted theft by the Aptera as a company. The next assertion that he makes is that Aptera cannot raise money because of some failing or shortcomings of the company. That is simply not true for reasons I stated above, but to dwell on that a little more, venture capital today has been more and more leaning on the prospect of not just making money, but gaining influence. They gain influence by controlling companies. If a company doesn't want to be controlled or morphed into something that the company wasn't ever intending to be in the first place, they will avoid being controlled by venture capital. They will look for a crowdfunding option, or they will look for the inspired billionaire, who increasingly is now leaning towards venture capitalist strategy of gaining influence, if the first few months of the current administration is any sort of proof or validation of that point. He then falls for another fallacy that, if I'm going to be honest, kind of gets under my skin, and therefore I will be reacting out of botheredness. There are some who assert that rich people are rich. There are people that assert that because rich people are rich, they inherently have some kind of mental advantage or some kind of extra little bit of acumen that a layman like myself or other rich people do not have. I fell for this trick too, and I will counter that with this. Between 10 and 30% of billionaires, depending on who you ask and how you tally them, inherited their wealth and then grew it. Another chunk of the others made that money by taking advantage of loopholes in the system to cheat workers, excessive tax breaks for businesses, and other levers to make their money. While the remainder, depending on who you ask, ranges from a wild 20% to 79% sweep or swing, made their wealth organically by themselves. Or rather, not by themselves, more they grew from a small salary to a multi-billion-dollar situation. The next assertion is that because Rivian is spending $100 million on an e-bike company, Aptera can't get to production with the 200-ish million they will end up spending by the time they get to production. The problem with that is you can't compare Aptera to Rivian in any way or any of their industries. Rivian spent several $billion to get to production with their truck, which is basically built like every other vehicle. Aptera is so much simpler from a component perspective alone that it makes perfect sense to me to believe that Aptera really can get to production with around double the capital Rivian is about to spend on an e-bike company. The last and most relevant point I will talk about here is the assertion that Aptera is only going to hurt small investors. My counterpoint to that is Aptera themselves, Aptera Owners Club, Telosa VV, Rich Rodriguez, Drive the Lightning, myself, and many, many others have all talked about the risks of investing and how, as an investor, you should not invest more than you are willing to lose. And I will reassert that right now. As an investor, you should not invest more than you are willing to lose. The offering circular that you can click on before you invest says the same thing. The prospectus that you can click on before you invest says the same thing. They are doing their due diligence to make sure people understand that this is a risky endeavor. If someone remortgages their house to make an investment in Aptera, they only have themselves to blame, with so many sources telling them to make sure they are investing wisely. The remainder of this video, he basically asserts that he likes the idea, then he leans on tired FUD tropes and insinuates that because startups fail regularly and Aptera is operating very lean, that Aptera is doomed from the start or a foregone conclusion or something like that. All that I will say to that is pessimism is easy. It's safe. It's comfortable. But pessimism has never changed the world for the better. Thank you for watching.